Wow, I'm winded. Yeah. I'm so very, very grateful this evening. I had the chance at our convention to say the thank yous, most of them, to my amazing caucus colleagues and to Tammy and my family and to the party, but it just doesn't feel like it's enough. I have been so blessed by this party and by the opportunities that I've been given that it's hard to stop saying thank you. It is not lost on me, ladies and gentlemen, that especially these days, political leaders usually give their last speech to the membership on election night, and it's usually a concession speech. And I want to thank you all very, very much for making sure for the work you did that I never had to give that speech. And I'm going to ask probably a couple times this evening that you come behind and around whoever is the successful candidate tonight and ensure that they don't ever have to give that speech either. You know, I do want to acknowledge the Provincial Council, the Management Committee of the party, our President, James Thorstenson, who's done an outstanding job of leading us through this process, as has the LEOC. This is something new for us. We've never done anything like it. Certainly it's the magnitude of this event, of this process, is nothing like anything the party has ever done before, and so I think the party did a great job. And I also would ask you to help me thank Charlotte, Maggie, Susan, Deanne, Dale, Kyla, Caitlin, JR, and Patrick Bundrock at the party office. They've been working very hard, and then there's been a couple of nominations thrown in there, and they're getting ready for by-elections. And we're very fortunate in this organization to have the party office we have and the volunteer base that we have. I'm also going to ask you to help me acknowledge and thank an amazing group of candidates who have stepped out and stepped up to run for the leadership of this party. They have acquitted themselves so very well. They have, I believe, already begun the renewal that a leadership change can bring just by the campaigning they've done. They've re-engaged with Saskatchewan people, listened to them. I can tell you that some of the decisions we made in government in the last while is because we've been hearing from the candidates who've been hearing from Saskatchewan people, and they are a credit, each and every one of them, and their organizations and their volunteers. You are a credit to the process and a credit to the party, and to the extent we see renewal, it's already happened, and it's because of them. So please help me thank those leadership candidates. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been so generous. The party's been so generous and encouraging to myself, so supportive of myself and our family, Tammy and our kids. And that means so very much. I cannot possibly say thank you enough for that. But what I would do is ask that you would tender that same generous encouragement and support to whoever is successful tonight. Because what is at stake in the months and years ahead calls us, each one, to proffer our very, very best, our complete and fulsome effort to come together as a party after a very competitive process to unite so that our party may continue to have the honor of serving, so that common sense, servant-hearted, free enterprise, growth-oriented, compassionate leadership may continue in the province of Saskatchewan for years to come. My speech tonight is going to be a little more partisan than speeches I've given lately. And here's the reason for that. We have seen candidates and campaigns contest for this leadership. They've worked very hard. They've fought hard for their respective candidates. The candidates themselves have competed, but that's what it is. It's a family competition when it's a leadership process like this. None of the campaigns or their candidates, no matter who you marked on your ballot, are the opposition. We only have one of those. And I want to talk a little bit about them. Just before I do that, I think it's worth canvassing another question. How stands the Saskatchewan Party on this January late afternoon? Well, it stands strong. Strong because we have outstanding women and men who serve in a caucus that is, I think, the best in the country. Strong because there are 27,000 members in this party now. Strong because we are built on constituency local organizations and their legion of committed volunteers who are disciplined. Strong because we have the best political ground game in the country, and it's not even close. We figured out long ago that people had 100 channels if they had cable TV at all, and maybe they didn't answer their phone, and when they did, maybe they didn't want to spend a lot of time answering survey questions. And so we discovered as a party that the best way to ensure we got our message out and that we were listening and that we were successful is this. And there is no organization in Canada today that is better in terms of a ground game than ours. We are strong because of our... Yeah, sure, you guys did all the door knocking. The party stands strong this evening because we have strong finances as well. And Patrick Bundrock asked me not to say that. Because, you know, we still need people to be generous with their support. But the bottom line is our finances are strong. We own our own office in Regina. The mortgage has been paid. We have a lead in the polls. You probably saw some polling here out by the media in the last little while, and they pegged our lead at 15 to 17 points. I can tell you our internal polling is now complete for this last quarter. Caucus heard the presentation just on Wednesday, and our lead, we think, is even a little bit bigger than that. Imagine that. After that Buckley's mixture budget, the very difficult budget that we brought down, the difficult decisions that were made, after that we have a lead in the polls. The party's strong. By the way, I think part of the reason for that is if you asked Saskatchewan people about some specific measure in the budget, they didn't like a lot of them. But if you asked them, and we did, do you like the plan? Do you like that we're probably the only province in the country that is facing a deficit that actually has a credible plan to get it back to balance within the term of the government? We're the only party that's facing a deficit that seems to have not developed amnesia about what this country, all of us, went through under different provincial political parties in the 80s and what it led to in the 90s. And I think that's part of the reason why Saskatchewan people would say, well, first of all, they've done a pretty good job on the economy. And secondly, this budget was tough, but at least they're going to step up and make the right decisions and get it back to balance while everyone else is doing something else. And we are strong today. The party is strong because of this leadership process, because of the renewal that has happened, because of the engagement that has been led by our candidates. And it is important that the state of the party be strong tonight because of what lies ahead, because of what we will need to do in the future, because of what we'll need to do on behalf of the province in 2020. Which brings me to the opposition that we'll face in the months ahead and in that election. I want to share a thought with you tonight, if I can, and it's just this, that today's NDP in Saskatchewan, and I would argue in Alberta as well, bears very little resemblance with the NDP of Roy Romanow, actually. at least that era of NDP gave a nod, more than a nod, frankly, to fiscal responsibility. They actually made some very difficult decisions in the 90s to get back to balance. And I believe that at least those in leadership of that party at that time, in that era, were comfortable with the sectors that drive growth and create prosperity in our province, with oil and gas and with mining and with modern agriculture. The fringes of their party have always been a little uncomfortable with resource development and modern agriculture, but at that time, at least the leadership was supportive of that. This current iteration of the NDP in Saskatchewan and Alberta is different. I think they would feel more at home in downtown Toronto in a coffee house talking about political issues down there than they are in a coffee shop in Arcola. And they're not as interested in fiscal responsibility, and they are less comfortable, and maybe something worse, with the things that we do well in the province that pay the bills. So I'm here to tell you that that's not just my theory. There's some facts we can look at in evidence to help make this case. Look next door. The province of Alberta that elected an NDP government. This last year they tabled a $10 billion annual deficit. $10 billion deficit. If we did that in our province, roughly speaking, $2.5 to $3 billion. That would be the equivalent in Saskatchewan if we were to do that kind of a deficit. A $10 billion annual deficit. They'll add $30 billion to the debt of Albertans, of future Albertans, in just 3 years, with no path to balance. They've said so, at least none within the life of the current government, and 6 credit rating downgrades in just over 2 years. In our province, we've seen the NDP here now in 3 different campaigns promise more than there was ever going to be in the budget, and even in a difficult situation, they would demand to spend more and more and more, because I think in some respects the current NDP have lost touch even with their fiscally responsible roots that you can see just a few decades ago. What is even of greater concern, though, ladies and gentlemen, to all of us, the risk that we should focus on as we contemplate what we all do after tonight, is how the NDP seem to feel, the modern NDP feel about the drivers of our economy. How do they feel about modern agriculture, really, when the mask's off a little bit? How do they feel about oil and gas and about pipelines and about uranium mining, and how do they feel about resource development in general, or crop science, frankly? Well, I would point out this fact. I'm going to quote the Premier next door twice, once to give her credit and once in this instance, which should give us all concern. She said this, and it's a quote, about her own province, about Albertans, and she said this about the energy sector in Alberta relative to the environmental issues that they were very, very focused on. She said, quote, "Alberta is Canada's embarrassing cousin that nobody wants to talk about." She said that of her own province. The NDP leadership said that of the energy sector in Alberta. Folks, Tammy and I, we have neighbors just down the back alley. He's a young father who is an independent contractor in the oil business. The definition, the epitome of a small business person. And he was out of work for more than a year. He had saved some, so he made it through that time, and now he's back to work again. He is paying taxes. They're raising their kids. They've got them enrolled in activities. He pays local taxes. He pays provincial taxes. Some of his federal taxes go to an equalization program that help other provinces. And far from him being an embarrassment, he is a source of pride for this province. He and all those others that work in that sector that create the quality of life that we want. We're not ashamed of them in this party. So what about the NDP in our province? Certainly they wouldn't feel the same way. Well, actually, if you look at the record, it might even be a little more alarming, maybe a little worse. Here's what I mean by that. A couple of years ago in Edmonton, the federal NDP gathered for their convention, and they were going to debate and discuss the LEAP manifesto. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the LEAP manifesto, let me tell you what it called for. It called, by the way, the drop in oil prices a gift to Canada. It calls for the end of all free trade deals. It calls for an end to any infrastructure projects that transport and extract resources. It calls for an end to any energy development. It'll be fossil fuel. And the end to modern agriculture as well. It's all in the LEAP manifesto. And to her credit, the NDP Premier next door said this of the LEAP manifesto. We believe that it was ill-considered and, quite frankly, very tone-deaf to the economic realities that are being experienced in Alberta. And what did leaders in the Saskatchewan NDP party do with that same LEAP manifesto? They voted for it. Heather McIntyre, an NDP candidate in Regina. Nicole White, an NDP candidate in Saskatoon and on their provincial council. Kathy Spruill, a member of the Legislative Assembly, and heaven forbid if they ever form government, she'd be in the cabinet. She voted for it too. And this was a quote from her when she explained her decision. What I did do was support a proposal to discuss the issues within the document over the next 2 years to have a more fulsome discussion about the future of our country. You know, ladies and gentlemen, if you're from the province of Saskatchewan that relies on the foundation of our resources and modern culture for the economy, for the government to be able to do anything worthwhile to help those who are most vulnerable, there are certain discussions that shouldn't be furthered. There are certain debates that you just stand up and say, that's not in the interest of the people that sent me here or anywhere else, and I'm against it. I mean, the LEAP manifesto, this thing could not be any more anti-Saskatchewan if it were called the We Hate Bunny Hugs, Pierogies, and Vico manifesto. And if ever they were the government, governments are called on to defend these sectors sometimes, to promote them, to provide the right investment climate for those industries, and then maybe to defend them against outside attack or outside interests that pose a threat. Like the Trudeau government or some future Trudeau government of some other generation. They just keep coming back. There's evidence, by the way, of the fact, the answer to the question, how would they defend our interests? We saw it on display in the legislature this fall when Dustin Duncan, the environment minister, presented the Made in Saskatchewan climate change plan that doesn't include a carbon tax. And one of the questions from the environment critic and the other side, who would probably be a minister if they were ever the government, the NDP environment critic said, did you check with the feds? It was kind of the point of a Made in Saskatchewan plan. Did you check with the feds? You mean the federal government that unilaterally and without consultation to energy-producing provinces struck a methane emissions reduction deal with the president? You mean those feds? You mean the feds that are imposing a carbon tax, that he announced it when the environment ministers are meeting in another room? You mean those feds? We don't work for the feds. This party works for the people of the province of Saskatchewan. All of that should be plenty of motivation for all of us to come together at the end of tonight, get the job done. But if you wanted some more motivation, I got something else to offer, I hope. Consider the fundamental change in the attitude of this province that the candidates have noted. The positive attitude that has happened across this province. And by the way, it's survived through a long down cycle on commodity prices. It's not just survived, it's thrived, as the economy has also done comparatively well in a difficult time. Remember that it always wasn't the case. remember that all of us in the province took our cue from many NDP leaders who didn't seem to be always all that positive. They would call Saskatchewan the wee province. They would say, Saskatchewan will be always in and out of equalization, lowering expectations for us. When we lost population, an NDP economic development minister basically said, well, it's not so bad when people leave, when we lose population, there's more left for the rest of us. They said, leaders of the other guys said that it's statistically impossible for this province's population to grow even at the national average of 1% a year, because that's all our plan ever was. Ladies and gentlemen, that attitude came from leadership. So it shouldn't surprise then any of us that it would be pervasive across the province. But it's changed. You know, I remember as being the opposition leader during the 100th anniversary of the province, going around and listening to different speakers, ministers of the Crown and the Premier even, tell a story about a canoe race. And the story of the canoe race apparently was a race that happened in northern Saskatchewan. And there was a team that was winning the canoe race, and they stopped so that everyone could catch up, and then they all crossed the finish line together. And, you know, it is a very good story. It's heartwarming, and it's a compelling story. But the problem is, the Premier and other NDP ministers would say, now that is the quintessential Saskatchewan story. No, it's not. It is a heartwarming story. It is a good story. But to make it a Saskatchewan story, how about they win the race? And they paddle back and encourage the other ones until they cross the finish line. How about the people in the canoes in the back cheered the ones that won because it's okay to get a new truck every year if you can afford it, or win a canoe race if you can do it. How about that team use some of its canoe race prize money through a party for everyone else, and then decided to start their own canoe training business? How about that? How about they develop a new canoe training app called You Can Too Canoe at the new high-tech incubator at the University of Saskatchewan? How about they hire employees? How about they pay taxes? How about they make a donation to Telemiracle and maybe the Children's Hospital? And if they got any left over, they buy some pierogies and lentil snacks and a case of 016. That's a Saskatchewan story, ladies and gentlemen. It's a lot more of a Saskatchewan story than we all finished last together. In this province, it's okay to win. I was raised by parents who taught it's okay to win, to compete and win. Win with grace and honor and dignity. Give back if you do. And if you don't win, try again. That's Saskatchewan values. That's the new Saskatchewan. And let's not risk it ever going back. There's a choice coming in 2020. It's going to be a choice between one party that is uncomfortable with the things that we do to create quality of life in this province, with the sectors that drive growth, and our party that's proud of those sectors, that wants to create the right climate for those sectors to thrive. It is a choice between one party that has sort of a timid view of our role in Canada, thinks we should check with the feds, and another, our party, that has no federal ties, that is unambiguous about the filter we would use on every federal issue, which is it good for the province of Saskatchewan? It is a choice between one party that said they'll implement a carbon tax, and ours that has said we will fight it. It will be a choice between one party that has stated publicly they don't like to set goals because they might not make them. Serious, it's in Hansard. I won't be reading much of it anymore, but you can look it up. Versus our party. We boldly set targets in surgical wait times, in supports for the disability sector, in school completion rates, in exports, in investment, in population, because we know that you'll either exceed the goal, meet the goal, or make a whole bunch of progress and move the province forward trying to get to the goal. There will be a choice in healthcare. On one hand, the NDP and their ideology that says only the public sector can ever do anything in healthcare, even if it means longer wait times, which it did, longest in the country, or for either diagnostics or surgery. It's like their ideology has become an orthodoxy. It's like a church. You can picture it, can't you, this church? Thick orange shag rug in the aisle and lava lamps at the altar, and only one way ever to do healthcare versus our party that believes in innovation. In fact, we've demonstrated it. We've lowered surgical wait times significantly to among the lowest in Canada by allowing private sector clinics to operate in the public system. And no, the earth didn't open up and swallow the legislative building when we made the change. How about 2-for-1 MRIs? So people can pay for their own, but they have to pay enough that it provides for one on the public system, just like the riders used to be able to do by themselves, or workers' comp clients. That process, that innovation of people being able to pay for their own has resulted in 2,000 more scans without the taxpayer paying a dime. Right? So how about that choice? Actually, better care, more timely care, not perfect, more work to do certainly, but better care at St. Paul's versus another tract of old rhetoric from St. Tommy. Ladies and gentlemen, the choice in this election will also be very much about its future. I have seen for 10 years the opposition. They've done some good work, let me be clear about that. They've pushed us on issues and done their job, but the part that's frustrated me the most perhaps is when they were almost gleeful, over anxious to point out that I thought the growth is going to come to an end. What's happened here for 10 years is an anomaly. They used the other B word every chance they could. They sort of spread this fear. That's fear, isn't it? Telling their supporters and others, oh, this is not what's happened in Saskatchewan. This is not the reality. This is not the long-term deal here. It's going to get worse. That's the choice on one side, fear. We're offering a different choice. The choice that we offer in 3 years from now, in 2020, is still hope, as it was 10 years ago in our very first election campaign. We believe our best days are ahead of us in this province. We believe that this positive attitude is the new normal. We've seen this population of ours grow in every single quarter of our government, even through difficult commodity price cycle times. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just leave you with this. In terms of that choice and who wins that choice, hope or fear, well, if we come out of this convention today and into the weeks and months and years ahead, if we come out humble and hardworking and disciplined, offering a vision and a program worthy of this great province, if we come out of here united behind the leader, well, then we know who wins. Because this is the new Saskatchewan. Because this is the new Saskatchewan. And hope wins here. Thank you so much. May God bless our province.
But it's the same old tune, fiddle and guitar.